Hi, I'm Lucas Gilkey with Hometown Hero, and today we're here to talk about a very interesting piece of Texas cannabis and marijuana history and also federal history as well. First off, Hometown Hero, you can go to our website, hometownherocbd.com. You can purchase hemp-derived cannabis products with your credit card, and we can ship them to your house fully federally and state legal, most states. So, why are we here, right? We are here to talk about a Texas tax stamp. This is a piece of Texas history that is now, I guess, very rare. When I got it at the time, I bought it off of eBay for $5. I'm seeing them now as high as $200 on eBay, and then one with a actual assigned serial number like this one has, I'm seeing them even higher. So we're going to talk in detail about sort of how this ended up being a piece of Texas history and why they're so valuable and why they're so rare, and what's coming up in the upcoming legislative session, because I know all of you guys are here to learn what we're doing, what's going on with the legislative session that starts next week. So we're going to talk about that now. Okay, so we're going to cover a little bit more in detail now about the Texas marijuana tax stamp, sort of how it came to be and where it is now. We're going to heavily cite a 2016 Texas Tribune article by Ross Ramsey that was phenomenally well written and covers a lot of the details on this. So in 1937, the Marijuana Tax Act was passed, which restricted marijuana use to only those that could pay a heavy excise tax for specific authorized industrial and medical uses. Now, one thing of very important note in 1937 that correlates to this future Texas tax stamp, from which theoretically started in 1989 and went through 96. They used a spelling of marijuana with an H, and it's not very common knowledge as to why. So when the Marijuana Tax Act was passed in 1937, the government wanted people to be scared of a foreign drug coming from Mexico. And they believed the best way to do that was to manipulate the spelling of it, remove the J, replace it with an H, and make it sound more foreign. Think about how horrifying that is for a second. 1942, marijuana was removed from the U.S. pharmacopoeia and doctors began to discredit marijuana as not having any medicinal use. 1967, the Commission on Law Enforcement and Administration of Justice got in on the action. Since the Marijuana Tax Act had raised an insignificant amount of tax, it was turned into a criminal law, imposing sanctions for people who bought, sold, or possessed it. The war on drugs started in the 1930s, but the 60s was a real turning point for creating mass incarceration and stigmatizing millions of people. Interesting, the federal Supreme Court made it unlawful to enforce tax on illegal drugs. The states began issuing these tax stamps in 1983. From what we can tell, Arizona was the first to do it in 1983. They had a subsequent license as well, where you had to pay for the license to be able to sell marijuana. So think about that for a second. People that were selling marijuana illegally had to go buy a tax stamp from the government to illegally sell their marijuana. Now, why the hell would anybody do this, right? Doesn't make any sense. There's a very specific reason for it. The government realized, the state governments realized that they could arrest people on not just the charges of selling illicit drugs, marijuana and other substances, but they could also arrest them for tax evasion, right? So now they could take all of their personal property that they could tie to the sale of the marijuana, of the illicit drugs, of whatever, and now they had another avenue to pursue them and get more money out of them. It's actually incredible how much money some of these states were making on this. We'll reference Alabama real quick, whose tax stamp came out in 1988. Quote, Alabama law says that no dealer may possess, distribute, sell, transport, import, transfer, otherwise use any marijuana with an H or controlled substance upon which a tax is imposed by section 40-17A-8 unless the tax has been paid on the marijuana or other controlled substance as evidenced by a stamp or other official indicia. Kansas Department of Revenue, quote, drug dealers are required by law to purchase tax stamps from the Department of Revenue's Business Tax Bureau. In order to protect against any possible violation of the self-incrimination constitutional protection, which is referenced earlier, the 1969 case for the federal Supreme Court, a dealer is not required to give his or her name or address when purchasing stamps, and the Business Tax Bureau is prohibited from sharing any information relating to the purchase of drug tax stamps with law enforcement or anyone else. That's super comforting. The stamps must be affixed to the drugs when they are seized to prevent tax liability. Think about how crazy that is. Payment of the drug tax, the purchase and affixation of the stamps, is due immediately upon acquisition or possession by the dealer. The stamps are valid for 3 months from the date of issuance. If drugs are seized without stamps or the stamps which are affixed have expired, the possessor is liable for payment for the tax as well as a penalty. Wild. That's one of the craziest things that we've ever come across, and we decided to start our video series with this because it's just so crazy. So in 1989, Texas chose to go ahead and pass their own tax stamp bill and have this basically put into place, where now in Texas, well, not now, but back then, if you were selling marijuana in Texas and you did not have your tax stamps affixed, you were now applicable for being prosecuted for tax evasion in addition to selling illegal drugs. So what happened in Texas? Quote, former state representative Billy Clemens of Lufkin, Texas, sailed the tax through the House and Senate in 1989 and got a signature from then Governor Bill Clements. It was a political no-brainer because it allowed politicians to make a political and policy statement. So in 1989, the law was passed that brought these tax stamps into play in Texas. Important thing to note, this tax stamp spells marijuana with an H. So they continued the sort of racist propaganda that came from the 1930s of trying to scare people with a foreign drug from Mexico. Let's see. Now, another note that is brought up in the Texas Tribune article is if you want to call it the states, the federal government, whatever, they learned about prosecuting people with tax evasion really from the Al Capone incident, where, the guys essentially had murdered lots of people or had them killed, but they actually ended up busting him not for prohibition but for tax evasion. And this is, I think, a more modern interpretation of what they did with Al Capone. Bob Bullock, the Texas comptroller at the time, made a splash unveiling the stamps, which were printed on silver foil and featured drawings of death or a Jolly Roger and the words death, drug, taxes connected by arrows. So this particular stamp that we have is a 1 gram marijuana stamp. It's got the Grim Reaper on it. Has death, drugs, and taxes. It's on a silver foil, 1 gram, $3.50. Texas tax paid. This happens to be serial number 004860, and it says Texas Comptroller of Public Accounts. So fascinating thing about this stamp, I bought this stamp on eBay in probably 2015 for $5. The stamps right now on eBay, I just checked the other day, they're going for $200 a piece, and they aren't assigned serial numbers. The stamps that you buy right now on eBay are void, so I'm assuming they were never issued, right? This is an actual issued stamp. Somebody went to the Texas Comptroller of Accounts, paid for a sheet of these, which I wish I would have bought the whole sheet, paid for a sheet of these and then turned around and sold them, and I think I paid $5 for mine. The ones with the serial numbers are exceptionally rare. I've never seen one in person outside of the one that I own, and the people that I've shown it to, whether they're in the industry or they're politically affiliated in Texas, most people have never seen one either. Most people don't even know these exist. They're very rare. So what is it worth? No idea. But I will say I went ahead and ordered one of the kilo stamps off of eBay just because of how rare they are, and they're no longer being produced. So why are they no longer being produced? In 2016, incoming comptroller Glenn Hagar pushed to have a bunch of unused tax codes cut. The tax stamps were not removed on purpose, it seems, but they were lumped in with a bunch of outdated tax codes. So in 2015, these actually still existed and they were still being used. In 1996, there was a case where a man was caught with marijuana and billed by the state for $49,070 in taxes for tax evasion. The court ended up ruling that the federal Supreme Court case was correct, and the court couldn't essentially, the law enforcement couldn't essentially prosecute this guy for selling illegal marijuana and tax evasion. They had to pick one or the other. I don't know the details of that case, and we can pull that up and possibly put that in the notes section for the video. That's pretty much everything in a nutshell around this tax stamp and how it came to be. It was a tool that was used to prosecute marijuana, if you want to call it dealers, possessors, whatever. Theoretically, if you got caught with marijuana, whether it was a possession crime or a dealer crime, distribution crime, and you didn't have the proper tax stamps, theoretically you could have been prosecuted for tax evasion. So we're being constantly asked right now, what can everybody do to help us with the upcoming legislative session? To be quite honest, just support us. Just give us your support in whatever way that you deem the best fit, and that's enough. We are here to do this on your behalf. We're here to do this for the consumers, for the stores, for all the employees, for everybody that we love and cherish in Texas specifically. We're doing this for you. Now, what's interesting is Texas has really become, in a way, ground zero for this battle throughout the entire country. because we are fighting so hard and because we've done so well already, a lot of other states are looking to see what happens here, whether it's the store owners and the consumers in other states or it's the actual politicians. There's a lot of people watching what we're doing in Texas, so it's very, very important. And just so you know, we've been prepping for over a year for this legislative session. We've been very quiet about it. We've been very under the radar about it on purpose and haven't disclosed our strategy. But we've been prepping for over a year for this, and we have some very big allies with a lot of resources. This is something that we've been planning for a long time, and we are expecting a large and involved fight. So, you know, where is this going? How's it going to end up? There's already been bills proposed to try and make what we do illegal. It's no surprise. People call in kind of scared about that and worried about that. It was expected. Don't take a bill being proposed as something that's going to actually happen. So please understand, we're going to be giving more updates as the legislative session begins next week. We're going to be doing weekly updates, what's going on, how we're doing it, who's involved, and of course, you know, what we can do to better support you guys throughout this process and give you the information that you need to give your consumers. Because it's important that everybody throughout this chain, from the manufacturing, from the distribution, from the sales, all the way down to the end consumer, it's important that everybody understands what's at risk here and that this could all potentially go away. I say potentially. We're here to make sure that doesn't happen. And we're going to get through this session, and it's not going to happen. I'm very confident about that. So I want to thank you all for your time. Hope you had a wonderful New Year's, and we are very much looking forward to get this legislative session under the way. Oddly enough, this has turned into my favorite type of sporting event. I typically in the past wasn't super into politics, but now it's getting to a point where I love legislative sessions because it's so fascinating. There's so many moving parts, and hopefully we can share some of that excitement and joy with you guys as we go through it, because it is actually quite a bit of fun when it involves something that you're pretty heavily vested in and interested in. So thank you for your time. Happy hunting. Have a wonderful year, and we'll see you again next week.